Oh, should we start our podcast by shouting out France Cafe
Oh
LLC?
my gosh, let's do it.
Tell the people.
They definitely, do they even listen to podcasts? I felt like those people inside of there were so sweet and so actually French. Like the
So
older man
actually
who was like
French.
running it was like, he was just so sweet. Okay, Lane and I went to this really cute cafe and in Montrose, like La Crescenta, La Cañada, Montrose. If you're in LA,
Yeah.
then you know that area.
If you're just looking at a map, it's like this sort of space between Burbank and Glendale, but like up high.
Yes, exactly. And it is called France Cafe LLC. And
says
even the
that on
sign.
the
It's so cute. And it's in this little strip mall. And it is actually French feeling.
Yeah.
And you had just gotten back from Paris, I think, is why we did that. And it was so delicious. And the gentleman who worked there was so sweet. I think it's his place and he made the food.
Yeah, I
and
think it was him and his wife. It's
Yeah.
just like these two
Yeah.
French folks back there.
They
But
were
when
so
you're
sweet.
saying it's so cute, like I worked at a French patisserie that was like very cute, like
Yeah.
very curated, very
Okay.
like you go in and it feels very cozy. The especially cute thing about this
Yeah.
is that the visual of it kind of matched the LLC of
Definitely.
it more than the France Cafe of
it
it.
felt like they had a great idea and almost like we could have been walking into maybe like their home and they're like, here's all the trinkets we brought back
Yes.
from Paris. Do you want one? It was like a lot of trinkets.
Yeah, but with like really cute stuff.
Yeah.
But then with kind of like fluorescent lights and in
Yeah,
like a strip
'cause it's
mall
in a
looking
strip
space.
mall.
Yeah. Sort of like when you're like, you know where the best tacos are and you go to this weird strip mall and it's unmarked and the phone number doesn't
Yes.
work and you go in there and there's no decor, but the tacos are perfect.
Yeah.
It was
Or
like that, except that
Chinese
everything was
food.
cute.
Often there's
Yeah.
really good Chinese food in places that aren't like the most
Thai.
aesthetically pleasing. Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yes. Yeah. It was that vibe.
But French food.
France Cafe LLC. And it was so great. I immediately after left a Google review of like, everyone needs to go here. This was so good and
so
cute. Yeah, you gotta
And
go.
weird. And that's what's so perfect
weird,
about
like
it.
perfectly weird. And I want them to stay in business really bad.
Me too. So if you're in LA or you come to visit in
Yeah.
LA, just consider it part
Yeah.
of the podcast universe. It's like one of the stops on your podcast
that would be
tour.
so great if we got to a point where people went there and then just like let us know.
Yeah.
Like, yep, this is our place.
That's the place.
Yeah.
If you go there,
you gotta
tag
go.
us.
You gotta go. Okay, welcome back to another podcast. I am Jessica Hover.
I'm Lane Dealing-Sherland, and this is Very Good Enough, a podcast from Very Good Mothers Club.
My face is still a little swollen. So for those of you who've been tracking, I did get some things done. And then immediately after we started recording, which that's so great. The show must go on. But I feel like today's is better than, I'm not supposed to tell you timeline. So please don't tell anyone that I'm, yeah. But yesterday I was definitely much more puffy and felt it. Today feels a little more. I mean, I just told you, Eloise saw me this morning and was like, you still look weird, but not that weird. And that was like the right answer. So just overlook that. Today, I'm very excited for what we're talking about. As mom Jessica, like as the person living it, I feel that what we are about to talk about is some of the stuff that I think about and wonder about with my own young kids.
Yeah.
So I will, of course, chime in, but I also am looking to you to like give us the wisdom because, well, the topic. Okay, you tell us. What is
I'll tell
it?
you. The topic today is an answer to like the kind of question, like a whole strata of questions that people ask all the time, which is basically like, how do I prepare this child for the next stage, right? Like, oh, my little toddler is someday going to have to go to pre-K and I want to make sure that they're really ready for that. Or my preschooler is going to school soon and I want to make sure they're ready. Or even like my baby is, oh, this was a question I got, I think just yesterday. Like, I've been nursing my baby and they bite me. And I let them suck on and bite my finger because they don't have any teeth. But in a little bit, are they going to be confused when I'm like, no, don't bite other kids? So like this thing of like, how do I now prepare them for the thing that's in front of them? And I hope you guys like it when I just give you the spoiler right from the outset.
Yeah.
Because my whole thing is like, oh, you don't. Oh, you totally don't. You don't need to do that at all.
Yeah.
So we're going to just like pull that idea apart a little bit today.
I love that.
I love it too. I think for me, learning about this, it goes a little bit into brain development in like a very simple way, but like learning about this was very freeing because I thought, I don't know, there's just kind of a lot of pressure of like, I'm with this person and I need to project forward. And I think sometimes that doing that can sort of like cause you to override your instincts a little bit. You know, like sometimes
Sure.
when you're with a child, you feel like, I know what this child needs. But then there can be this thing of like, oh, but later they're going to need something else. And I feel myself kind of push over that feeling of like, I know what this child needs because I am trying to meet something that doesn't actually exist yet. And so I feel like there's a lot of freedom in being like, this is you and me now, and later is later. So the thing about human brain development is like we come into this world as like little tiny, like really beautiful, precious little blobs, right? Like we're here a little too early because our heads grow too big. They don't like the growth of a baby head and the size of an adult female birth canal, like they don't match. So we just get born early. That's like the workaround. And that's why they just lay there and like they just want all those like womb feelings again, you know, like make it dark for me, squeeze me, hold me really close and tight. And like it's just milk, like learning how to swallow milk and like breathe air and like it's so nothing. And you see that in the brain, like it's very, very smooth in there. There's no wrinkles, there's no experience, there's no knowledge, right? It's very blank.
Wow.
And then everything fills in from there. But the sort of metaphorically, the brain development happens kind of from the bottom up. Like the knowledge and experience really stacks on itself. So really filling out this bottom layer fully, super fully, is really important because the next thing is going to stack on it. So if I have this tiny little newborn and I'm like, well, you're not going to be able to do this really soon, like that would seem obviously kind of silly, right?
Sure.
We're like, no, you're about to be an infant, so let's go do some infant things. Like, no, we understand very naturally, like
first.
we got to totally do this newborn thing where you just get really squeezed and really fed and really looked at. Like that's kind of it. Learn how to swallow this food instead of like taking it in so fast that you like literally the digestive tract. Like the track is there, but they have to practice letting food go in and not spitting it back out. Like it's so fundamental.
Even passing gas, even pooping, like all of these very, very basic human things.
Yes.
It's all connected and that's all they're doing. But you see it actually in like newborn moms being like, well, I don't want them to only sleep on me. So do I be concerned now? Because I actually instinctively like want to hold them a lot and I want them to sleep on me. But since in a couple months, I will need them to sleep in another bed. Do I start having them sleep in another bed now?
Good example.
And it is that thing of like, I want to be ready, but also the instinct right now is actually to hold them. Like you see a lot of new moms being like, I just would really like to hold my baby. I don't want all these guests to come in the house and immediately take the baby from me so I can go do something else. Right. I want them to do something else so I can hold this little guy that I just was growing in me.
Yeah. I've even had a mom ask me before if you can spoil a baby with too much love.
Oh yeah, people say that like, too.
Oh no.
No,
you certainly cannot. In fact, they need to feed on this love and adoration just like they need to feed on some kind of milk. Like it's essential. And all you should do with a newborn is just gaze so lovingly at them and feed them and hold them and squeeze them, right?
Totally.
And yes. So you fill that whole layer out because what that newborn needs to know is like, I do definitely exist. I'm for sure here. Sensation happens all around me, so I probably am materially here, right? Like they don't even know.
Yeah.
But like enough pressure has happened on my body that I know that there's like, okay, I'm here. I don't just vanish away.
Yeah.
I've now slept, gone into the dark place and come back into the light place enough times that I'm starting to expect that when I go into the dark place, I will in fact come back again to the place where I'm awake and taking things in.
Totally.
Right? Like, and when I cry out, something comes to me and a lot of loving attention is gazed at me. So I'm probably good. There's positivity here. This is like a warm thing. I should reach forward. Right? Like that's kind of the whole deal. Also, I can swallow and I can poop and I can write these so fundamental. If you missed anything in there, that would be tough, right? Like to move on to the next thing with a gap in that space. I feel like that's a very helpful place to be looking at it because it's so clear. Like, no, these are existential needs.
Yeah.
In order to exist here, you got to get this part really thorough.
Totally.
But it's the same when you're 2 or when you're 3. You can, and this is a place where this happens a lot, you can with a 2 or 3-year-old be like, you're going to have to go to kindergarten. So let me really get a lot of letters into you. Let's start practicing with worksheets. Let's start sitting for longer than you want to sit, because later you're going to have to sit longer than you want to sit.
Yeah.
And what you might see at the end of that is a child who temporarily seems really advanced, because they know a lot of letters and they know a lot of numbers and they speak really precociously, and they can see that that's what's important to you. So they've practiced pleasing the adult.
Right.
And so adults feel very pleased by them.
Sure.
But what you are actually losing in that child is, for example, could be lots of different kinds of things, exploration and creativity, right? Like this thing of like making a huge mess, really exploring with a material until you're fully satisfied that you understand it. The child may start to sort of like stop thinking about their own inside experience because they're getting so much reward from your experience of them that they start to sort of organize their inside self around, how do I keep performing this well so that I get this nice, good feeling, rather than being a child who has kind of forgotten about you and spent a lot of time in their inside world and brings that to you when they want information or they want to share, and then you join them in that space, and then they kind of leave you on the outside again and fill out this inside world. Like these are gaps that you could start to find when it looks like this child is actually really advanced, because you've tried to pull them forward in this way, but now there's like little blocks missing out of this layer that was actually really important. And then when you expand that to an adult, maybe you have someone who's has a hard time taking initiative because they only want to do things that would please others, or a child who like is really focused on their outsides and doesn't feel a lot of value unless like things look really good from the outside, or a person who just like doesn't really know how to explore necessarily. You like, you just know people who are like, no, I just do the thing. I don't really think for myself. I don't really ask what I want. I don't really take risk. Like these are just examples of like, perhaps this is the way that
Something
could like
was
kind of
skipped.
magnify because we skipped this early thing. I think the really important thing is whatever stage a child is in, you let them be so fully that, because number one, they really need it. Number two, it actually will improve their outcomes. Like a child who's really been a 2-year-old is going to do a lot better in the next stage, which is very social 3-year-old. And a 3-year-old who now has really explored themselves and other people and like done the 2 thing and then the 3 thing is going to be a person who has some readiness to learn as they move towards school, which like we talk about, okay, we're gonna move to talking about my favorite thing, which is readiness to learn. Readiness to learn in pre-K, like standards. There's like school standards for this kind of thing, and readiness to learn is like a box you can check.
Okay.
And right before you go into school, they want to identify it as like can hold a pencil correctly, has chosen a dominant hand, knows some letters, these like really practical things. But these are not things that actually prepare you to learn. Those are the things that you were gonna learn anyway. Actual readiness to learn is a confidence inside yourself to say like, I can be here. I know a little bit about my inside world. I'm willing to go out and interact with other people in a social way, take some social risks. I'm willing to try things that I don't know if I'm already good at. So when a teacher calls and asks, like, does anybody know this thing? I'm willing to say like, oh, I know. Or when I don't know how to do something, I know how to be like, I don't know how to do that. These things, like this is learning. Decision making. Would you go be free in the classroom, child? Like there are kids who stand completely still when you set them free. They have no clue what to do. It's more terrifying than anything to be told like, do whatever you want, buddy. And the child just looks back at me like, what do you want me to do? And I'm like, I don't care. I made a world for you. And they're like, what do you want me to do? Like that, a lot of times that is the most precocious kid in the room who's like, I can meet all your expectations. And I'm like, go be free. And they're like,
I can't do that.
You tell me what to do so that I can do it right for you.
Interesting.
Readiness to learn. I hate it as an educational category and I love it as a phrase. So if you ever run into that phrase, take it super literally. Like, what would my child need in order to be ready to learn? And I'm here to argue that they were really a 1-year-old all the way. And they like rubbed whatever slimy thing all the way up and down their arms and got all these sensory experiences. They put everything in their mouth when they were little, and you picked out the dangerous things.
Yeah.
Instead of being like, don't ever put anything in your mouth, kid.
Sure.
You know, like really considered what is important for them to not do. And then everything else they got to really explore. And then they were really two, and they had really had those feelings, and they did all the 2-year-old things. They knocked on every proverbial door. Can I get through this one? Can I get through this one? Can I get through this one? And they learned about all the edges, and they learned that it was safe to go out there and explore. And then when they hit the edge, like, come back. And there's a safe person to come back to. And then they were 3, and they really played with friends, and they really played with social dynamics and imaginary things. And they like used all that new creative power to like make worlds out of Legos and sand, and, you know, like really had a lot of power inside, and they got to use their bodies, and they jumped and they ran and they crashed and they skinned their knees and they climbed up things that were too high for them, and they felt their own feeling of, I think this is too high for me. And then they got back down instead of being like, is this too high for me, mom? Like, those are the kids who slip, are the ones who like the parent is like, adding a lot of agitation.
The parent is thinking for them. And the kid hasn't been able to think
inside their own body.
Interesting.
Yeah, and test it, really testing everything. Like, these are the things that bring you self-confidence, an understanding of self, the ability to make decisions, creative problem solving, keep you in touch with your general creativity.
Yeah.
Like, that's readiness to learn.
Yeah.
So that's my school argument. I do not think that you bring school forward. And I do think that's one of the big things. It's one of the big places that's like a source of this question in parents is like, how do they be ready for school? And a lot of teachers don't have great perspective about the whole child. Teachers think about their classroom and what a child needs in order to be ready for their classroom or function well inside this classroom. But this classroom is not life. This classroom is a place for like information transfer and hopefully some social skills and stuff.
Yeah.
But like the wholeness of a child's growth is not really supported in classrooms usually. And so the teacher is totally an expert on what's going to happen in class and a really valuable resource. But you got to know, like, I want my kid to do well in your class, but it's way more important to me that my kid is like a whole person. Yeah. You know? And school, I feel that school readiness just trickles down and down and down and down. And it's this thing of like, well, he's not going to know how to sit down for 5 hours, and being like, yeah, it's a really tough thing even for the kindergartner to do.
Sure.
Let's certainly not put that burden on the 4-year-old and then the 3-year-old before them. Like, let's really let these kids be exactly where they are, because it is valuable for them. It does improve their long-term outcomes, and it's their only chance, right? They only get to be 3. They only get to be 1. They only get to be the baby gnawing on your finger because they don't have teeth right now. They're going to get the teeth, and you're going to have to make them stop because it's naturally going to start to hurt you. Yeah. So if that's what they want to do and you like it and it feels good, like, you let that baby toothless little gum all over your finger. Sure. Yeah. It's a baby. Let it be the baby right now while it can be.
Yeah. It's like maybe our instinct to want to protect from everything is to kind of anxiously anticipate the next thing and try to be there and also be here. And like somehow it helps us. And what I'm hearing you say is like, no, like, yes, when we get there, we'll deal. Yeah. But here, be here. What do you need right here, right now? If when that little baby bites on your nipple, does that hurt? If it hurts, then we stop it. If you're okay and baby's feeding and it just seems to be part of them learning how to eat and them kind of interacting with you with the means that they have to interact with you, you do it until it doesn't work anymore. That's the thing I say all the time. You do what works until it doesn't. Yeah. And that's so, I think, healthy for both mom and little one. Something I was thinking about while you were talking back when we were kind of touching on the little tiny baby stage and like all the hugging and loving and snuggling. It's like something flagged in me of what I felt like when I was a NICU mom. And then what I hear now from NICU moms is this sense of like, oh no, there was this stage while my baby was in the NICU where I didn't get to do all the looking and the holding. And sometimes we can't even touch. There was a time where like touch needed to be minimal. And I guess I just want to like speak to you for a second. Yeah. I feel like when we've gone through something like that, it's a bit traumatic, and it kind of makes like even the fact that I thought of it is because I went through it, but also now we have quite a lot of NICU moms in our circle. One of them has twins in the NICU in this moment. And there is this fear of like, oh no, am I not building the bottom layer? Right. that then everything will build on? And do I have to be, because of this piece that didn't go as planned, do I worry now for later? And so I just want to like speak peace over you that if your baby is in the NICU because baby came prematurely or because baby is developing in some way and not yet safe to go home, then what you're doing to build that bottom layer is trusting and working alongside this medical team that's caring for your baby.
Yeah.
And it's the right move. And it is building the bottom layer. And when these babies get home safe to you, then you do all the next things, which is the holding, snuggling, everything. But just, I just felt to speak that into even like there's a stressor that happens if like it's your second or third baby who's in the NICU. And so you can't even be there all the time. So they're not getting your voice and they're not getting your eyes. And that can be a really distressing thing. And then the reason why it goes along with this is because then our minds jump to how is this going to affect them later? And we just want to come back to now and like, what do you need to do to get through now? And how can we trust that this little baby is going to be exactly who this baby needs to be with all the love and support you're going to give it, him or her. There was something else you said that was really, just made me think of like a tree or a plant. Like when we plant a seed, we aren't actually able to make it grow. Like that's not the power that we have. There is some sort of power that makes things grow. According to your worldview, you have a name for it. And part of this parenthood thing and part of being a caregiver even is knowing that what we're doing is kind of tending to the environment, but we're tending to the actual seed as it is right now.
Yeah.
So if we have, let's take it to plants, like if we have a little plant, then we're caring for the little plant. We're not treating the little plant as if it's a big plant. When it's a big plant, we're going to deal with big plant issues. So maybe it's overgrowth or, like there's things that happen with plants that maybe you have to move them to a different pot. Maybe you have to shift the way they're growing or add that stick thing or like you do all the things, but it would be a little bit silly if we planted a seed and then immediately started to be like in a bit of a frenzy over when that thing gets bigger. And so what is appropriate is like, okay, what can I do right now to make this environment healthy? Yeah. Oh, cool. There's not that many things, actually. It's pretty simple.
Right.
And then as it grows, you stay in touch with that plant, meaning you look at it, you're aware of it. Does it look crispy? Is it like, and then you make the modifications appropriately. But again, you're not the one growing it. You're not, you're nurturing it, but growth is happening because that's the design for this thing.
Yeah.
And same goes for our little ones. We feel so responsible to grow these guys and to really be like, it is up to us. And sometimes that even feels like it's put on us. Like you bring the baby to the doctor and they do the weighing and the measuring. And then they immediately look to you, mom, like, well, how many times are you feeding it? Like if something's off, well, what are you doing, mom? And so there is that pressure, but you're a very responsible, loving parent. Yeah. And all you can do is the best you can do with the stage you're in right now.
Yeah.
And we're not going to try and jump to the next one.
Yep.
And when we do, it's what I'm hearing is like, it doesn't actually go well, even if immediately it looks like it is because they're like parroting back to you these things, these letters or these numbers. Like it needs to come in the time when they can actually grasp it.
Yes. I love what you're saying, both in bringing it back to the NICU, but then also the trees. Like I feel like I have a connector thought for both of those even. Like, first of all, everybody's layer is their layer. This is not like ideal human growth at this layer of brain development. There's some universal stuff that we need as a species. But everybody's layer grows in its own way, right? Everyone is their very own 1-year-old. No one has ever had the same 1-year-old twice, and no two parents have ever, right? This is its own deal. So whatever that ground layer is for your child, perfect.
Yeah.
That's perfect for them. Trees experience lots of stuff early on that cause them to grow this way or that way. And some of them get pushed over by storms when they're little.
Yeah.
So they start out growing over to the side and then, up they curve back toward the sun later, right? And they straighten themselves out, where sometimes somebody comes along and props something up so that the tree doesn't fall over. Because
Right.
it did kind of grow wonky for that little piece. But now look, we fixed it, and what a healthy tree. And it just needs a little more support over here because of its very personal experiences of the way that it grew at the beginning. And that's totally okay.
Yeah.
And you can go back and put in those supports, right? You can notice, my tree is growing off to the side, but I want it to be this giant, strong oak tree. So you build up one of those little like, you put a thing around it.
Yeah.
So that
Stay tuned for our gardening podcast.
you put that thing around it so
Yeah.
that it grows tall and strong. And if you're listening to this, looking at your 3-year-old being like, dang it, this child has not learned how to creatively generate ideas about play or exploration on their own. Like, oh my gosh, my child is totally tidy. They never do get their clothes dirty. They hold really still. They do, like you're like looking at them being like, oh, interesting. I showed this person what was going to get them like this fun social connection. And so they're just doing that.
Right.
We got to now circle back and round them out a little bit. You can absolutely make shifts with your child and be like, okay, you and me are going to learn how to do some messy playing here together, kid. I'm going to start giving you more choices to make with a lot of support, because now I realize like, decisions are really hard for you. Think I've been making all your decisions for you.
Totally.
Yikes. Now we're going to have to practice something a little different to just help round out that part of yourself. It's not like
Even
it's
with
over.
plants, though, it's like spotting a dead branch. I mean, like, let me trim this one off because new growth will come.
Yes.
You look at something that's not working, don't freak out. Just, all right, we're going to actually not do it like that anymore. And then, something new and beautiful comes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. People talk about, there's a way that people kind of can dismiss children's experiences, especially like more challenging or negative ones, by being like, kids are resilient. Kids are elastic. It's like a thing that just kind of got into our language sometimes. And that's, both of those statements are true. Kids are resilient and kids are elastic. That does not mean that gnarly circumstances don't affect them, or that if you have to like uproot their life and move them to a new city, it's just fine. They'll figure it out. They will figure it out. They want a lot of support when gnarly things happen. What it actually means that children are elastic means that they can be going in one direction for a really long time, even if it's bad. Right. So you can have some like pretty bad early experiences. And then if that shifts, and then you go for a long time in this new direction is going to become the norm for them. But there's a consistency here that is not, people sometimes want to just like jump back and like jerk kids around a little bit sometimes and then be like, it's going to be okay because they're elastic,
Yeah.
We move all the time, or like there's a lot of fighting in our house, or there's a lot of whatever, this weird, whatever it is. And that can get kind of swept away by saying that they're elastic. And also on a less intense level, like in terms of, is it going to be confusing for this child if later they're not allowed to bite people when right now they are allowed to bite me? What would be confusing would be one day to the next, they gum on your finger and it's fine. And then another day you're like, ugh, I don't like that. Like in that same stage where you guys are just like, the confusion would come from a lack of consistency in a direction. You may absolutely change directions at any time and then provide consistency in this other direction. And there will be some, there's going to need to be support in the transition, but that new direction becomes the new direction for them. And that's what elasticity is.
Yeah.
There's a neurological component to that I honestly don't understand well enough to explain, but I know that it exists.
No, it's real.
Where like elasticity and brain development does allow for these changes in direction, but then there needs to be consistency in the new direction. So if you miss something early on, or you notice there's a gap, or there was a traumatic birth experience, or any other kind of big life event, like for any of those reasons, and you feel like, there might be like a gap or a struggle here, that's totally fine. You can now shift like the way an interaction goes, or provide new support that now that's your new kind of consistency, and fill some of that back in. So I'm glad you brought that up.
That's really
wouldn't
good.
ever want anybody to be like, oh, dang, now there's just these holes in my kid.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's so good. And it's when we think about all of the things we're trying not to confuse our kids on, because I hear this come up too in calls. It's like, well, if they're allowed to do this now, won't this be confusing later? Or if I say, like this happened, I think we were on a call together, like a mom has to give the child instruction, but then the mom's like second guessing herself because she's like, but then the kid's not allowed to like talk to me like that or something like that. Basically, where my mind goes is like all along this journey of us raising these kids, there's going to be things that change all the time as they develop and as our relationship develops. And so kind of like a funny analogy in my head is like, what if I'm already going, well, isn't it confusing that I tell my kids they can only sit in the back seat in a car seat when one day they're actually going to drive? Like, should I jump ahead? No, obviously I wouldn't jump ahead. They are not ready.
Yeah.
I am not ready. There's so many things that go in between. And it's not going to be that one day my kid's learning to drive and then being like, this is very confusing, Mom, because you used to have me sit in the back seat and now you're going to let me drive this car. I am very confused. No. In time, things become clear.
Yeah.
So we're not afraid of them biting the friends they don't have because they don't have friends. They don't have teeth. They don't have friends. They don't, like, so many things have to happen before we get to the spot. You're not crazy for asking that question. That's a real question.
not at all.
My point is just we can make ourselves absolutely crazy doing that all the time because so many things are going to shift in our relationship with our kids. I mean, you take it all the way out to life. Like some point in our lives, our kids are going to be caring for us. That's very confusing.
Yes.
But this is like life is this, right? And so you live the rhythm of like what is right now, what's happening in your life. How do you do that to the fullest you can do it? And then in 6 months to a year, you're going to be in a different stage, especially with young kids because they develop so quickly. And then you do it according to that stage. And it's beautiful and you're doing great. And it's, it's going to have its own challenges, but you don't have to try to be in the way future stages while also trying to live in this one. That's like, it's too much. It's too much for any of us, especially if you add more than one child. How are you going to be in the future and the present for all of these kids? That's too much. Even though we do it instinctively to like protect everybody and we don't like the uncertainty. We want to try and do everything right now because it feels like an equation. Like if we do this plus this, then it equals healthy child thriving, right? And that's what we want. But I guess what I'm hearing from you is this sense of like healthy child thriving or healthy adult thriving, even like longer term, is going to come back to us doing our best, us doing good enough in this stage we're in all along the way, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Take some pressure off, honestly, for me.
Some pressure off. Yeah. And confusing is kind of part of growth for very young children. That's part of what they're doing. They're kind of confused a little bit all the time because they don't know anything. They're learning everything there is to know. So even when they're trying to walk, it's like, I feel like I should be able to stand up and I cannot. And I'm very confused about that. And I'm crying because I can see the table and my hands are on it. And yet I cannot push up with my legs, right? Like confusing is a big part of growth. And that's true in social growth as well. So your toddler is going to encounter circumstances where certain things are allowed and then they're going to be in a new environment and that thing's not going to be allowed. That is frustrating. And it is confusing. And part of what they're doing is learning how to tolerate frustration and confusion, which is really important. A lot of us did not get enough of learning how to deal with that feeling of frustrating and confusing because the world is frustrating and confusing. I currently am allowed to do things in one place that I'm not allowed to do in other places and in some relationships and not in other relationships. And so that's part of that's just real. Like it's actually really confusing to just be a person and learn how to do things. And so it is okay to some degree that your very young child is experiencing a little bit of that.
Makes sense.
And that needs to be like as like kind of minimal, like you look for how do I make
you're
this
not trying to confuse them.
as clear for them as possible. But a lot of it's going to be, oh, sorry, buddy. I know we can do that at home, but we're not going to be able to do it here. I know that's confusing. It's okay that this doesn't feel good to you right now.
That's right.
Sorry about that. Let's see what we can do. Like that is going to be the pattern for a lot of their life experiences. And that's totally okay. And even in doing that, part of what you're teaching them is like, it's okay to not feel okay all the time. Which is another thing that a lot of adults are missing that I really struggle with. Like when I don't feel okay, I'm like, we got to freaking fix this.
Yeah.
Where like ideally there would be a feeling of like, oh, this feeling of discomfort I'm having, that's a feeling. I don't like it, but only a part of me is having that. Like a part of me feels uncomfortable,
Right.
and that feeling is going to move through me, and my circumstances are going to change, and there are things I can do for myself even while I'm experiencing discomfort. Like all of that is stuff that totally already exists in your toddler dynamic, and it's really good. Maybe there's even a note about being an adult who's able to be like, this is what stage I'm in. I'm 32. I worry a lot about if I'm going to be 45 and be like, oh no, I missed the things I wanted to do in my life. But I'm not 45. I'm right now.
Sure.
And in order to have and feel the way I want to feel when I'm 45, like I can only do that today, right? Like there's the only time that exists is right now, right? Like we've already done a bunch of stuff, and presumably you'll go home later and there will be kids and you'll hang out with Becca and, but I don't know. This is all that's actual. This is it.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
any version of future me experiencing pleasure or being something that I want to be, like all of that is embedded in right now. How do I want to be right now? I want to be in this conversation with you, doing a good job, making sure this equipment is working, but also being present and enjoying this coffee.
Sure.
Right? Like me really savoring this coffee feeds into my ability to enjoy my life. I'm more likely to enjoy my life later if I make sure that I'm like noticing and tasting this sip.
Yeah. 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 It like brings up a little something in me of like, there's a part of me, and I think there's a part of us as people that is constantly over there, like constantly somewhere else, often in the future, sometimes in the past, and thinking like, if we just do this, that, and the other thing, whether it's like acquiring stuff or arriving to a certain point of success, or our child arriving to a certain point of sleeping or something, then we will start to savor this life. Like we will feel like, oh yeah, whew, I'm here. But I don't know. I think that if we are never in the habit, or like we never create some intentionality around being here now and letting that be enough for us today, maybe we would arrive to some of those places we think will bring us all of this stuff we're looking for, and we would still be so future minded that we won't even see it.
Yeah.
And so, some of it I think is also just like taking it in and a bit of surrender to like, I'm here today and my kids are like this today. And uncertainty is really hard for everybody. So we all feel that this uncertainty about life, and we're trying to make things certain because that feels less scary, and it just doesn't work at all. Unfortunately, no amount of money is going to save us from the uncertainty. It just is still going to be like that. And so, I think that that's also very like precious wisdom for us in this community, is like, be here in this stage you're in. And if it's really stinking hard, you're doing so good. It's not going to stay like this. The thing about the stages is they do pass. But as much as you can be here and look for ways to experience some goodness in it, then when we get to the next one, we're going to be primed and ready to receive the goodness in that stage as well. And it all builds on each other, which I guess is the whole point of this.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So whatever stage your child is in now, there, of course, are edges to that stage too, right? Like we're not overindulging children, just being like, anything you want right now because I'm being with you, right? Like there are still edges. But the edges that you like, where you show them the line of like, nope, this is what we're not doing. Those should be things that don't work now. Not, I'm drawing rules about the future.
Because in a year, you'll go to school and you'll have to sit for hours. So today you have to sit for hours.
So there are super hard no's.
Yeah.
And there are things you have to do, right? You have to be nourished. You have to go to sleep. You may not go into the street. You may not claw at my face. Not because I don't want you to claw at other children's faces, but because you're not allowed to hurt my face.
You can't.
Yes, you may not.
That makes sense.
Right? So there are some really, really clear, absolutely nots. But I think there should be as few of those as possible.
Sure.
They should be really reasonable and make sense and be things that actually protect you.
Yeah.
And kind of everything else is like,
Yeah.
explore inside this circle that I'm drawing with my arms of the absolutely no, because those things don't work now. You may not now do these things. And later, if those edges move, cool. They're absolutely going to, right? The edges will absolutely move and expand as a child gets older and is able to manage more things.
Makes sense.
And that's good. And these edges are no, whatever they are. No, now. And everything inside, let's do it. Be you.
That's great.
Cool. Does that feel satisfied? Do you feel complete?
Yeah, I think so. I felt like while you were talking, there was one thing that came up that was going to be a question. Oh, there is. Here's a question I'm asking for myself, but I feel like others might agree. Okay. What do you think about all the sitting kids have to do in school? This is more like from an educational side of things, because it feels weird to me as mom to watch my kids go from like summertime, which is like they somehow wake up running and they just run until bedtime, to going to school where actually my daughter's school has a no running rule, no running even at recess, which I'm like, don't you think that would actually serve you guys if she was running at recess? I feel like she'd be much more chill in class.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just wonder, like, from an educator's side of things, are you down with the system?
No,
because it
sucks.
seems, I do too.
I have two thoughts about
Okay,
it.
go ahead.
One is your child has to go to school by law. So
So
educate your children.
them.
Obviously, don't go to jail. And also, public school is it's the most accessible childcare in the whole wide world.
Yeah,
and people need childcare. And great. You do whatever works for your family.
Yeah.
And all of the like big opinions I'm about to share, they do not mean don't send your kid to school. Don't do what you need, right? They just
My kids are in public school, if you were wondering.
Yeah. If I have children, they may go to public school. This is not a...
And mine may eventually not be in public school. I have all I know is that right now in this stage where I am here, they are in public school.
Yeah, and great. Your kids are healthy and thriving and everything's good.
But I do wish they could run.
Formula and grilled cheese sandwiches, right? Like feed your kid.
Feed your kid.
And what do I think is like optimal for humans? I think that school sucks. I think sitting for kids sucks. I think it's the worst. I even, now that I reflect on preschool teaching, the style of the school that I was in, there was some structure to it and then a lot of free play. And where I'm at now, I'm like, I will never ask a 2-year-old who doesn't want to sit down to sit down ever again. Maybe when they're eating food, maybe.
Okay.
I might not even care about that anymore.
Okay.
But these like group time, circle time situation, there's no more for me. Like I just think that all growth, I think that children come ready in the world, like with a preset in our brain and in our body to figure out what we need to know in life. And I want them to be in a world that is rich in all the things I want them to discover. I think it's amazing to have an adult in a classroom because I know all the cool shit in the world and I want to show them, right? Like they don't know to learn about volcanoes. Volcanoes are amazing. It's my favorite thing in the world. And I love to present to you the option to know about hot lava and to know that it's under your feet at all times. That's so cool. And that's the adult's job.
Right.
It's to be like, oh, you hit one of the danger edges. And do you want to know about something really cool that you couldn't possibly know about? Like I'd like to introduce you.
Totally.
And then they do it. I believe that all learning happens in the body and in the hands. And our education system wants to cut your brain away from your body and try to put stuff at your brain as though your brain is not a physical material organ. They want to say like, you have a mind and we just want to talk to whatever your metaphysical mind is and pretend that you don't live in something that needs stuff. And so most education is just like so separate from actual knowledge. Like there's a way to teach math that happens in your body and it happens through like utilizing tools and measuring things and using numbers for actual quantities of stuff that you can see for a purpose. I need this many screws in order to put this thing together. So go count the number of screws. Okay, now we're going to make 2 of these. So go double the amount of screws that I need, right? Like there's a way that like learning could happen that's integrated into your life. And I think that creates again, back to like a whole human thing, utilizing the whole part of your brain. And then also the thing that you're making is useful for something. And also you're making it with someone else. So your social skills are building as you guys work on a project together. You know, like these are the ways that like cements learning. Like trying to separate learning from your senses is just silly. We don't store things without like the utilization of our senses. And so I think it's dumb and I don't want little children to be sitting like that. And I don't know how other versions of education work. Like I'm not the person with the solution at all, but I know there are lots of cool people out in lab schools and in other countries and in experimental spaces that like are churning out people who just are their knowledge is integrated into their whole self a little more as opposed to this thing of like, let's really try to memorize. Let's really try to sit still.
Yeah.
Almost no children need to be sitting still.
Yeah.
There are little children who can do it better than others. And so we think we're catering to their learning style. I don't think it's helping any children anywhere to be sitting and trying to just take something in through their eyes and like mind.
I love that. I would love to hear from you guys on this, because this is so like, this is the stuff I think about a lot, because once you start having kids of school age, or like you're approaching it, this is the stuff. Yeah. I would really love to hear from you. How are you guys going to do school for your kids if you haven't started already? What style of education? Are you homeschooling, public school, private school, charter school, Waldorf, Montessori, forest school? Like there's so much out there.
Forest school though.
I know.
Whoa, forest school.
Yeah, there's forest school here, but it is very expensive to be in the forest.
Sure.
It's probably, it's got to be an LA forest thing. Those things are pricey. Anyway, cool. That's all. We're done. We did it. We nailed it.
Love it.
You guys are doing so good.
So good.
We really believe in you and would love to hear from you. So please leave comments, write us, DM us, join the community, hop on the Zoom calls that we do. Would love to know you, and we will see you soon. Bye.
Bye.